A crew backs a truck to the edge of a creek in the Smokies and starts pumping poison into the water. 1957. Right now, your feed is running blurry trail cam clips of animals somebody already wrote down as gone. 5 of the dead fish they pulled out that day belonged to a species nobody had described yet. 11 animals on this list. Every one of them has an official date of death. The extinction stories that reach you are trail cam clips and roadside photographs. The 11 rulings they are supposed to be overturning have fewer readers combined than any single one of those clips. Every one of those dates is a finding. The question is whether it is a finding about the animal or about the file the government keeps on it. Somebody sorts the dead fish on the bank into piles. 5 small catfish go into a jar, 3 inches, mottled brown, and alive it would have stung you. Madams carry venom in the spine of the pectoral fin, which is most of what a fish that size has for a defense. It lives 2 years, hunts at night, spends the daylight under a flat slab of rock about the size of your palm, up on the crest of a riffle, and drops back into the deep pools when the water turns cold. A fish built around not being seen. 12 years later, somebody described it from those jarred specimens and assumed the description was of something already gone. 23 years. Then somebody turned over rocks in the next creek. Same fish. 46 species went out of that water. Around 10 never came back. The trout the poison was for never took either. Nobody has said what else went into jars that year and never got a name. 140 pounds of cat on the shoulder of a parkway, still warm, 4 lanes of asphalt behind it. Before dawn, June 2011. The state biologist who reaches it works through a checklist built on one assumption. This is somebody's escaped pet. It is the only category the state has for it. Connecticut had not confirmed a wild mountain lion since 1880. The checklist does not go well. The claws are intact, which a captive cat's usually are not. The pads are worn rough, the way they get from walking farther than you would think a cat walks. No collar, no tattoo inside the ear. Male, 2 to 5 years old by the teeth. The pet box stays ticked anyway, and a tissue sample goes to a federal genetics lab. 3 months earlier, the government had closed a review of this animal across 21 states and recommended taking it off the endangered list on the grounds that the subspecies no longer existed. Put the March finding next to the June date. That is where the story ran in the press. The lab result is the part that undoes it. The profile goes against a reference database of more than 800 wild cougars from the western states. It comes back from the Black Hills. 2,450 kilometers in a straight line, and that is the short way to measure it. No cougar has ever been documented walking farther. Isotope work and physical inspection found no sign it had ever been held in captivity. It made the walk on its own feet, across highways and rivers and most of a continent, which makes it the wrong animal. A western cougar, no connection to the population the government ruled on that spring. The last record of the eastern kind is a puma a trapper took in Maine in 1938. Somebody photographed the carcass. After that, nothing, anywhere in those 21 states. 73 years, 1 record. Someone born the year that animal was shot could have worked a full career and retired before the file on it closed. Nobody has published what a confirmation would have required. Same creek, second fish, bigger than the first one, 4.5 inches, 3 or 4 years, and in that time it spawns about twice. Nocturnal, like the other one, the way people finally learned anything about it was by getting into the creek at night with underwater flashlights. Nobody collected one anywhere on Earth between 1893 and 1968. 75 years. For a fish that gets 2 chances to reproduce, that is somewhere past 20 generations of nobody looking in the right place. When it was finally described, in 1969, it was described as a species that no longer existed. The description was a headstone. Then it turned up in the same national forest water the first fish was hiding in, and in a creek up in Virginia, and both populations had been sitting there the entire time somebody was writing the obituary. A country this surveyed lost a whole species for 75 years, and the record does not explain how. Third, and this one stayed exactly where it was, under somebody else's name, 2.5 inches, lives 2 years. The male backs in under a flat slab of rock and guards the eggs stuck to the underside of it, and here is the part worth sitting with. He has structures along his dorsal fin shaped like eggs, fake ones. A female swimming past sees a nest that already has a clutch in it and reads that as proof he can be trusted with hers. The whole physical record of this fish in the poisoned creek is 3 specimens, collected in 1937 and 1940. Then, the rotenone, and nothing. It kept living in the creek next door. But every survey that found it there wrote it down as a dusky-tailed darter, a different fish, already on the endangered list. Only in 2008 did somebody sequence it and split it out. Its own species, named for the Cherokee word for clean fishing water, and younger on paper than most of the people watching this. 46 species came out of that water in 1957. 3 of them turned out to be rarer than anyone on that bank could have known, and the last of the 3 was not sorted out until 2008. A 2-page notice goes into the government register on the 8th of October, 1998. It ends a program. The animal it is about stands 26 inches at the shoulder and runs about 4 feet nose to tail. 45 to 80 pounds, males around 60. Long, slender legs, big feet, a wide head with a broad muzzle, ears that sit up tall and look borrowed from something smaller. Mostly brown and buff, black down the spine, and the red the name promises shows up only on the ears and the legs. Bigger than a coyote, smaller than a gray wolf. It moves at dusk and at dawn, and spends the rest of its time not being where people are. 6 or 7 years, and it is done. Hold the legs. They matter in about 2 minutes. 7 years before the notice, wolves had been released into a national park in the southern mountains. 37 went out over the life of it. 26 died or were recaptured after wandering off parkland onto farms and private ground. That is the failure everybody reported. There is an older number underneath it. The animal had been declared extinct in the wild in 1980. Every wolf in that park descended from 14 individuals, the only ones, out of everything the government caught, that tested as pure. 20 years after the notice, somebody on a barrier island on the Gulf Coast is working on coyotes, and the coyotes there are wrong. Bigger than the ones inland, longer in the leg, longer in the body, and they want the flooded marsh instead of the open ground. The genetics come back carrying red wolf ancestry, still circulating in living animals, 38 years after the species was written out of the wild. And the long legs are the wolf. That is the inheritance doing work, a body built for water the coyote did not arrive with. You are ahead of me, and you are right to be. Ancestry inside a coyote is not a wolf. A hybrid carrying fragments of a lost genome does not put the species back in the woods, and calling that survival stretches the word past anything useful. And red wolves are not gone from the wild anyway. A separate release on a coastal refuge, 4 years before the park project, is still running. It is the only one that ever held. Then the part that is harder to put down. Those animals carry 5 genetic variants that appear in no other population tested. Not the southeastern coyotes, not the gray wolves, and not the captive red wolves themselves. Red wolf variation that survived only out there, in a body no survey was pointed at. Nobody has said how many other bodies are carrying it. A shell of this kind runs about the length of your thumb, greenish, with faint rays down it. 15 to 20 years old when it dies, which you can read off the growth rings the way you read a tree, and it hunts. The females in this genus open the shell and put out a pad of bright white tissue, visible from several meters away in clear water. A darter comes in to investigate. She snaps shut on its head, seals around it so it cannot pull free, holds it for several minutes, and pumps her larvae directly into its gills. The fish sometimes does not survive it. Then it swims off carrying her young until they drop to the riverbed as mussels. Somebody lifted the last one anybody would ever record out of a river in Southwest Virginia in 1982. 41 years of nothing after that. 2 of its lifetimes. In a river people survey constantly because it holds more rare mussels than almost anywhere in North America. Struck off in 2023, with 7 other mussels from rivers across the southeast. A search that thorough coming back empty is either an answer or a question. The rule treats it as an answer. A man lifts a 2-inch catfish out of a riffle in one Ohio creek in 1957, puts it in a net, writes it up, and has no reason to think it is the last one anybody will see. That is close to everything anyone knows about it. 18 were ever collected, all from the same short stretch of the same creek. What it ate, how it spawned, how long one lived, that work was never done. No photograph of a living one is known. It went onto the endangered list in 1975, 18 years after the man with the net. It stayed there for 48 more. 48 years of federal protection wrapped around an animal nobody had ever really described. Struck off in 2023, nobody has said what those 48 years were protecting. 1992. Somebody finds a mussel alive in a Tennessee river the record had mostly given up on, wedged into a dewatered stretch above a powerhouse. Shell about 3 inches, dull greenish-brown, bluish-white inside. The female's back end swells and pinches into a lobed shape nothing else in that water has. The one population that actually reproduces is not there. It is in a creek in southwest Virginia, and what happens in that creek is the reason this animal cannot be moved. Its larvae need a fantail darter to grow on. Somebody ran the test properly. Larvae put on fantail darters from that creek transformed at 6 times the rate of larvae put on the same species of darter taken from another river. Same fish, different river. The larvae fail, so the animal comes with the creek attached. It is fused to one population of one fish in one place, and you cannot pick it up and set it down somewhere else. Most people who classify it treat it as a subspecies of the yellow blossom mussel. The yellow blossom is one of the 8 the government declared extinct in 2023. There is a living animal in that water filed underneath a name the government has formally retired. One of those 2 things has to give, and the file has not moved. Drive through eastern Kentucky in October, and you can hear elk bugling off the ridges. 10,000 of them on ground that was strip-mined, graded flat, and seeded. A bull runs 700-800 pounds, and some of them break 1,000. Tawny body, dark brown mane, a pale rump you can pick out through timber at distance. The cows are about a quarter smaller. The Shawnee word for the animal is wapiti, and it is the one that stuck. The bugle is the reason people drive out there. It starts low, climbs into something closer to a scream than a call, and finishes in grunts. Half a ton of animal making a sound that carries a mile. The one that made that sound in these mountains was shot out of them 150 years ago. A hunter took the last one anybody wrote down in Pennsylvania on the 1st of September, 1877. By 1880, the eastern elk was written off, same shape as the cat on the parkway, same problem underneath it, because the elk on those ridges arrived in trucks. Mountain stock for Kentucky, prairie stock for the park in the Smokies. The eastern kind lived inside dense hardwood forest. These use open grass, and most of that grass is reclaimed mine land. In 2017, every North American elk subspecies but 2 was collapsed into a single one. If that holds, the eastern elk was never a separate animal, which means it did not go extinct, which means the thing bugling on the strip mines is not a stand-in for it. It is it, and there is no way to check. Every eastern elk was killed before anybody preserved a meaningful number of specimens. Nobody can say what made it different, because the material that would settle it was never collected. 26 museum skins carried the whole argument about the cougar. For the elk, there is almost nothing. The file was thin before it was closed, and it was closed on a subspecies described from animals nobody kept. A bull bugling on a ridge in eastern Kentucky is loud enough to hear from the road, in a state where the last one died before anybody's grandfather was born. Nobody has said what to call it. When did you last look at the ground? Somebody did. A field zoologist named Andrew Rapp spent a summer day crouched near a blueberry thicket with a net, because amateurs had been posting photographs to an app, and he thought one of them might be the right insect. 1.5 inches, flightless. It has never flown, not one of them, ever. Olive and brown, and so well matched to leaf litter that the reason nobody found it may simply be that nobody could see it. It lives in young forest, the shrubby stage after a disturbance, and as Virginia's forests mature, that stage disappears out from under it. Startle it and it jumps, hard, and is gone. He found it on a gravel pile. His description of the moment is that he locked eyes with it and thought, that is probably her. Nobody had officially recorded one in Virginia since 1946. 78 years. No federal survey found it. A man following up on strangers' photographs did, and it sits on no state or federal protection list at all. 20 inches from bill to tail, a 30-inch wingspan, an ivory white bill built like a chisel, with enough muscle behind it to peel bark off a standing tree in sheets. People who saw one said Lord God. That is where the name came from. It ate beetle grubs out of trees that had died in the last year or two, which meant it needed forest old enough to be constantly killing its own trees. Last confirmed in 1944, on the endangered list since 1967. In 2021, the government proposed striking 23 species from that list on the grounds that they were extinct. Then it opened the comment period, which is the part nobody watches. The comments came back saying 2 of the 23 might still be alive. The final rule ran in October 2023 and removed 21. That is the only file on this list the agency opened, looked at, and chose not to close. It is still open tonight. A creek in the mountains, and a jar of 5 dead fish that turned out not to be the last of anything. 11 files. 3 animals that came back, 1 that was never gone, 2 that came back as somebody else, 2 that never did, 1 that survives as fragments inside another animal, 1 living under a name the government declared dead, and 1 the agency looked at in 2023 and chose not to close. 11. And 3 times on this list, the finding landed somewhere else entirely. The animal on the list may never have been a separate animal at all. A cougar in 2000, a darter in 2008, an elk in 2017. Every time, the file was about a category, and the category came apart before the animal did. The fish are still under the flat rocks, the elk are still out on the reclaimed strip mines. Nobody can say which name either of them will be filed under in 30 years. Subscribe if you want the next one of these before somebody quotes a ruling back at you.